I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the kinds of assistive technologies that I work with, the rehabilitation assistive technologies. They're all around uh, getting access to participation in play and learning for children who have pretty severe physical impairments. Um, so you can see the picture on the left that shows that children's main occupation when they're young is play. Not only is it a human right, but it helps them to develop all kinds of skills that they need as they grow up. And a lot of that plays through manipulation of objects. Well, when a child has a disability, like this fellow on the right, their opportunities for play and learning are more limited. He can't go where the toys and the learning activities are on his own necessarily, this fella, because he has a manual wheelchair. Someone has to push him there. His functional range of motion is here around his lap tray and his head switch. And so rather than building skills to walk or talk or manipulate, this assistive technology that we work for compensates for lost function. So this young fellow on the left, he's got two switches at his head that he is using to control a power wheelchair for mobility, a communication system for communication, and he can control a robot for manipulation of objects. So in this case, he's doing a math activity by pulling a string to measure the length of objects. But sometimes the technologies are more limiting. This young man has only one switch where he can control objects with. And sometimes it's not even that reliable. It's hard to know if he intended to hit the switch. And so what we're wanting to look at is using brain control interfaces and possibly even mixing those with other input signals like eye gaze and whatever residual switch motion a person has in order to capitalize on as much input as possible and to have those control the robots or computers in the environment. So the idea is to research and test ideas, and then eventually we move them into the home. We've had some success in using whatever's commercially available already in the homes and schools, and the advantage to doing things with what's available now is we get to learn about how to personalize the system, make practice guidelines, and we learn about the limitations of current systems and how we can implement things to address those. And so with robotics, we've sent things home and even in schools. And the school systems, we've had to kind of wait. Those teachers have their hands full in addressing the students' needs right now. But with BCI, we've had some success in going ahead and moving our systems home right now. So what I want to talk to you about today is some of those challenges that we've had implementing the home programs and some solutions that we've used and some potential innovative technologies that we might use. So these have all come in response to COVID-19, but the home is where we wanted to be in the first place. So that's been a good opportunity for us. The team that we're working with is across Canada. There are clinical centers in hospitals, and then we also have research with the universities. So our goal is to look at pediatric brain control interface, actually, because I mean, there has been quite a bit done for adults, usually people who have ALS, but very little for pediatric area. So the clinical programs are running some, had been running some programs with commercial sets, and they're answering questions like how to implement the BCI, what activities maintain interest, and have been trying it with kids who have cerebral palsy, brainstem stroke, brain cancer, Rett syndrome, for instance. And then we've also been doing some technical development for making systems more reliable and controllable. I want to show you this video. It'll show a child, this is his father, and it'll show his son controlling a robot car and a game using BCI.
Watch him play his first video game, he was so happy and ecstatic. It was great. Now mostly that stuff is made for adults, so it's in the younger stages of it for children, and they're just learning how Liam's helping them learn how to make it more accessible for children, and you know, at a younger age.
We've heard a parent say that, you know, for my son coming in to use BCI, that's their leisure activity, that's their extracurricular activity, where their siblings or friends go to dance or go to hockey. My son gets to come play a video game, whereas at home that isn't a possibility right now.
So COVID-19 sure helped to speed up that process, and at home it is a possibility now. And that's good, because rehabilitation activities should happen often, not just once a week when the kids were coming into the clinic or the lab. So I had this picture just in case the video completely didn't work. We kind of lost Dad for a minute, but it worked out in the end. So what happens is a package is sent to the homes, and that contains the BCI headset and a computer with all the software loaded. One of the problems in using commercially available items, so this is the one we've chosen, is the Emotive, because it's been out there for a while, it's quite reliable. Problem is, it's not really designed for children's heads, and particularly our participants sometimes have quite small heads, and it's kind of difficult to make sure that all those electrodes are connecting. And the commercial software requires that there's good connections before moving on. Previous versions of their software was a bit more flexible that way. So that's an example of how it's not so nice to have to rely on the black box of a commercially available item versus how our research items, we have so much flexibility and control over. Another area is we're using the motor imagery aspect of the devices, but we're not exactly sure how they're implementing it. Plus, there might be other paradigms that would be a better match for the child, but those sorts of systems aren't feasible to be using in the homes. Now, this company, Emotive, is willing to work with people, but it's going to improve their headsets, but those are going to take a little while to show up in their products. So once the headset is set up, parents have some, frustration with that step, but then they have to set up the rest of the system. And some parents are quite independent and they just follow along with an instruction manual. But we've heard that if anything goes wrong that first time, they just don't pick it up and use it again. And so it sits until they get followed up on to see how things are going. Other parents prefer things done in a different way. They prefer just a regular session over Zoom, and just like they're coming in for their weekly session at the clinic or the lab. So the system actually requires several programs to be opened, and they all need to communicate with each other. And so it's a bit much for parents to set up. So that's why we've used some different strategies. One strategy is using the remote control feature over Zoom. That's been good. And then another strategy that Toronto implemented was just having it all done in one step. So first of all, what you need to do if you had it all in separate steps is use the emotive program to train what does my brain do when it's not trying to make an action? What does my brain do when I'm imagining pushing this block further away? And then what we have to use a third-party program to map push to a space bar, for instance, in order to interface with the game that the child wants to play or the robot that the child wants to control. So here there's a little Spiro robot that's been running through a bunch of paint to make this very interesting program or picture. So this is a software that or a innovative technology that we think should help a lot. When we're using Zoom, we need to see more than just the face. You can see here, this adult who was test piloting things for us, her cap has fallen, it has shifted where it's come quite far forward. Now, if there would have been a full body image, the clinicians watching could have seen that she had a lot of involuntary movement. It was making her slide down in her chair a bit. So this full body protection, we're thinking maybe something that we could use. It's kind of exciting. Then we might be able to see when a person's position is being compromised, because being in the best position possible is very important for optimal control, and observing where artifact might have come from. I mean, we presently say, move the camera around, show me this, or use multiple cameras, but having a system like this, we think could be quite informative. The other part that's hard about all that research moving into the home is that we as researchers are not getting the data. We're missing so much. Well, the system that the Toronto folks have written does collect the raw EEG and number of activations, but it's out of context, and I'm not sure how useful it's going to be. At home, we ask parents to track the activities that they do with the children every day. So how much training are you doing? Make sure you train these functions and then do your fun games. Try to make them fun, so having stickers so that it keeps the kids interested, or a theme in something that they really enjoy. And then we also have ways to collect the data with what is requested, what was the activity that they had to perform versus what did they perform. And we asked the parents to keep track with little tick boxes. And then we can kind of get an idea how successful the system was that day. But one parent did this once and then kind of lost interest. The other aspect that we were wanting to collect is experiences with it. Has the usability of the system, was it helpful? Were there problems? Please keep track of them so we can address them. And likewise, parents kind of did it at first and not so much anymore. So there are strategies we could do. The next version of the Toronto software has that built in. And as long as you're in their game that they designed, we'll know what was requested and what was performed, so we can get an accurate measurement of this sort of data. We can also make people answer questions before they can go on to the next step. Those sorts of strategies for getting that all important data for us. One thing that everybody is saying is they want to be able to play more games. So there are single switch games are available on the internet that all you need is a switch or a space bar or a left arrow key or a left mouse key to run, but a little hard to ask parents to go and search those out. If they're in the clinic, we could easily set that up. But we are definitely trying to make a library of lots of games. Some of you on the line might have seen our Brain Game Jam advertised, where we were wanting students to develop games that could be used by BCI system. Now that did generate quite a few games, and those were all actually evaluated and ranked by kids who have disabilities. And I'll show you one of their favorites in the next slide. Something else that we're doing is developing our own games so that we can change things a lot on the fly. One game, but lots of options, lots of characters, lots of powers, lots of environments, so that children can change things up pretty quick, or we can change them up for the kids pretty quick. Got to get those all into the homes though. So I'll play a little clip of a two-person game. Eli is controlling the orange character with his headset, and the other fellow is controlling the blue fellow with the keyboard.
We're holding the key, Eli. All right. Oh, one of us goes and then the other one goes. I see.
Nice.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually. That really eliminates
The unbiased nature.
yeah, so now... Ooh, I got a power up. Ow.
And then
Oh, you're almost dead.
So you saw how the arrow moves around, and when it's in the direction you want to go, you make that motor imagery that you made when you were learning or training to do the push action. So it's a really fun game, very motivating. This one kind of degraded into a bit of a wrestling match at the end. And that was just in case the video didn't work. So this is super important, being able to play games with someone else. And so we can play this sumo boodle over Zoom in that remote control mode, but next steps are to make it playable over the internet. Super motivating because some of our participants have identified that they've got cousins or friends who've moved away and they want to be able to play together. The more they play, the more they want to beat their friend. But even now, like in the time of COVID, even your next door neighbor can't come over to play. So this is a super important next step. Another thing that we can do is have control of physical objects over in a remote location. So this will be important for this project so that kids can have access to more toys that they can play with. And also it was something that our teachers doing the learning activities with robots wanted to do, so that the kids at home with their access method or in school with their teacher, the teacher only has to worry about the access method part, whereas the child in the school or the person in the school can have the robot to manage. So teleoperation will be an interesting next step too. So that's why I took the word challenges out of the title, because the more I thought about it, it's been more like having opportunities, because it was super important to be in the home. That's where we wanted to be eventually anyway, and we got to go there because of the limitations in being in person with people came up. The thing is, we have to find a way to share the results from home with the lab, and then we can do iterative improvements to the systems and protocols. So that'll be coming up. And these are the students that I get to take these next steps with, and the support. And thank you, Maddie.
Thank you so much, Kim. Very interesting. There is one question from Martin. I thought Room Alive requires the use of Kinect camera. I understand this is no longer available. Has something replaced Kinect? Is there an additional SDK available for alternative depth cameras?
Yeah, that's a good point. So that type of system is what we would like to have. Hard to keep up with the changes in technology. Maybe Maddie, since this was something that you got me interested in the first place, do you have the answer to that question?
Yes. So as far as I know, it requires Kinect. It can use either one or two Kinect, depending on what it's going to do. But I don't know if you can use any other depth camera other than Kinect. So that's. And the second question is also from Martin. Martin, would you mind just unmuting yourself and asking the question, because it's a little, it's easier if you.
Yeah, I was thinking there might be an alternative approach, Kim, to using the Room Alive if the Room Alive system is not being updated by Microsoft. And that would be to use a system such as what we're using for markerless motion capture, where you would actually be able to look at the posture of the person and then display that using a mobile device. And an alternative to that, of course, would be to use Hussein's IMUs and maybe look at an IMU way of monitoring and presenting posture data. And we've developed an avatar called Yaro, which demonstrates the use of a sort of an augmented reality approach to presenting data through a mobile device, which might be a practical way of going for a home-based system like the one you're describing.
Yeah, I love those ideas, because looking at ways to make things as simple as possible too, to implement in the home, so markerless systems are a very attractive solution. I see someone has asked a question about the lack of parent compliance in reporting. And so this also relates to that making it as seamless as possible. Like, when the parents run into one problem, they're less apt to try it again, right? So you gotta make sure that problems are limited, that they have the access to troubleshoot them if possible. And then that reporting, it's even hard, I think, for us. Like we get all excited when we're in a session and we just want to interact. And so as much that can be automated will be very helpful. And so these sorts of solutions you're talking about, Martin, would really help with that automation.
Perfect. Any other question if anyone wants to ask?
Mandy, may I ask a quick question? Vivian here. Yeah, thanks, Kim. I have not worked with individuals experiencing CP, so this question may be a little bit naive. But how much movement are they able to perform? And could, in the end, wearable devices such maybe in addition to the brain-computer interface help? And and it could be even EMG devices, it could be IMUs, and it possibly could be even change in posture, as we saw from the previous presentation. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's a really great idea. Cerebral palsy really is a large spectrum of abilities. But even like when you're getting closer to the severe, like very complex situations, sometimes someone can make a movement, they can't target, or maybe it's really hard to target that particular switch, but they can certainly try to move towards it. And so that's where we could capitalize on that sort of motion, change it into a switch input for information, or maybe even have it as graded input, so that it's not just on or off, but it's degrees.
Yeah, I mean, and it possibly could be, it gives you more degrees of freedom, but it could possibly also serve as some form of rehabilitation if they have to intentionally adjust their posture, or they need to intentionally move their head, possibly, or their arms. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, that's very true, that sometimes skills do build, like having to keep your head up, for instance. We've seen participants who become much better at that skill because they wanted to see what was on that screen.